You chose yourself when it would have been easier to keep choosing them. And whether you fully realize it or not, that single decision changed the entire emotional balance between you. Most people continue giving pieces of themselves away long after they have stopped receiving care in return. They stay available. They stay understanding. They continue offering emotional energy to people who have already grown comfortable receiving love without protecting it. But you reached a moment where something inside you quietly awakened. You realized that constantly proving your value to someone who benefited from your presence but failed to truly honor it was slowly draining your spirit. And instead of fighting louder for their attention, you did something infinitely more powerful. You became still. That stillness unsettled them more than any argument ever could.
Because people often expect anger when someone is hurt. They expect emotional reactions, repeated conversations, desperate attempts to repair things, or dramatic endings. Those things still allow them to feel in control, but your silence carried something entirely different. Your silence carried acceptance. And acceptance is terrifying to someone who believed they would always have unlimited access to your heart. The moment you stopped chasing clarity, they were forced to sit alone with their own confusion. The moment you stopped trying to convince them of your worth, they were forced to confront how deeply they undervalued what they had. The moment you stopped abandoning yourself for the sake of keeping the connection alive, they began feeling the absence of the emotional safety they had quietly depended on all along. That is why this experience feels so intense now. Not because you manipulated them, not because you played games, but because your withdrawal removed the distraction they used to avoid themselves. Your constant presence once protected them from having to fully feel the consequences of their emotional distance. Your understanding softened the impact of their inconsistency. Your patience allowed them to delay growth while still receiving love. But when you stepped back, reality arrived all at once. Now they replay moments they once overlooked. Small conversations, your kindness, your effort, the way you noticed their moods before they spoke, the way you stayed emotionally available even when they were guarded. They remember the safety they felt around you. They remember how deeply you understood them without forcing them to explain every hidden wound they carried. And most painfully of all, they realize they may not find that kind of connection again. This is where obsession begins for many people, not in possession, not in control, but in loss. People become haunted by what they failed to appreciate while it was freely available to them. And what unsettles them now is not simply your absence. It is the realization that you may no longer need them in the same way they secretly depended on you. That realization shakes the ego completely. Because when someone becomes accustomed to your emotional availability, they unconsciously begin building parts of their emotional world around your presence. They assume you will continue understanding them, continue forgiving them, continue waiting while they remain undecided, emotionally unavailable, or afraid. They mistake your loyalty for permanence. They believe your care will survive regardless of how little effort they offer in return. But eventually, something changes inside a person who has spent too long carrying the emotional weight alone. Exhaustion becomes clarity, pain becomes self-respect, and love finally stops asking to be chosen by someone unwilling to show up consistently. That is the transformation they are witnessing in you now. You are no longer begging for reassurance, no longer shrinking yourself to make someone else comfortable, no longer accepting confusion in place of honesty, and because of that, they are seeing you differently than before. Not as someone endlessly waiting to be loved correctly, but as someone capable of walking away from what diminishes their peace. That changes everything, because people often do not recognize the depth of a connection until they feel its absence deeply enough to expose their own emotional dependence. They thought your love would remain untouched by neglect. They thought there would always be more time, more chances, more opportunities to finally say what they felt once they became ready. But now time no longer feels endless to them. Now they feel pressure where they once felt comfort. Now they feel urgency where they once felt certainty. And underneath all of it is a painful realization they can no longer avoid. You were never asking for perfection. You were asking for presence. You were asking for honesty. You were asking to be valued while you were still there, instead of mourned only after your energy withdrew. That realization is forcing them to confront parts of themselves they spent years avoiding. Their fear of vulnerability, their habit of emotional avoidance, their tendency to delay difficult conversations until opportunities disappear. Their belief that silence protects them when in reality it slowly destroys the very things they care about most. This is why they feel so emotionally unsettled now, because they are beginning to understand that losing you was not fate. It was a consequence of remaining emotionally asleep for too long. And perhaps the hardest truth of all is this: they are not only grieving your absence, they are grieving the version of themselves they could have become if they had chosen courage sooner. But your role is not to rescue them from that realization. Your role is not to return immediately because someone finally recognizes your value after feeling your absence. Your responsibility now is to remain connected to yourself, to remember how much strength it took to stop abandoning your own needs, to remember how much growth came from choosing peace over emotional chaos, to remember that love should never require you to lose yourself in order to keep another person close. If they truly return, let it be through consistent action, emotional accountability, and genuine transformation rather than fear alone. Let time reveal whether they are capable of sustaining the honesty they now feel pressured to confront. Because longing can awaken someone, but only real inner change allows them to love differently than before. And meanwhile, continue standing in the quiet power you discovered when you finally stopped chasing what should have met you halfway all along. Because the deepest truth hidden beneath this entire experience is not simply that someone fell deeply in love with you. It is that the moment you finally chose yourself, they were forced to see your value clearly for the very first time. In the end, this entire journey was never only about another person returning, choosing you, or finally realizing your value, after silence and distance forced them to face what they avoided. Beneath every moment of longing, confusion, separation, and awakening, there was a deeper purpose unfolding quietly beneath the surface. The real transformation was always happening inside you. This connection entered your life to break illusions. Illusions about love, about worth, about waiting, about sacrifice, and about what it truly means to be chosen. For so long you may have believed that love required overgiving, endless patience, emotional self-abandonment, or proving your value through loyalty to someone who could not fully meet you. But this journey slowly revealed a truth that changed everything. Real love never asks you to lose yourself in order to keep someone else. The pain was real. The silence was real. The confusion, mixed signals, emotional distance, and unanswered questions were all real. But so was your growth. Every moment that forced you inward became part of your awakening. You learned how to sit with your own emotions instead of chasing clarity from another person. You learned how to stop building your identity around whether someone stayed or left. You learned that your peace matters too. Your needs matter too. Your heart deserves consistency, honesty, and emotional presence, not only chemistry, intensity, or temporary affection. And perhaps the hardest lesson of all was understanding that someone can deeply love you and still not know how to love you well. Feelings alone are not enough without maturity, accountability, courage, and action. Love without healing often becomes fear. Love without self-awareness becomes avoidance. Love without growth becomes silence. That is why destiny separated you both. Not to punish either of you, but to expose everything that needed to change before anything real could survive. This entire story reflected one central truth again and again. Separation became the classroom where both souls were forced to confront themselves. One person learned self-respect, boundaries, and emotional independence. The other was forced to face avoidance, fear, pride, emotional immaturity, and the consequences of taking genuine love for granted. Whether reunion happens or not, neither person remains who they once were. And that is the deepest meaning of destined connections. They are not always meant to last forever in physical form. Some come to awaken you, some come to redirect your life, some come to reveal the parts of yourself that still need healing. Some come to teach you what love should never require. Others come to show you the kind of connection your soul is truly capable of experiencing once you stop settling for less. If this person returns, let it be because real transformation happened, not because fear of losing you created temporary panic. Let their actions speak louder than regret. Let consistency speak louder than promises. Let emotional maturity speak louder than longing. And if they do not return, let that truth free you instead of breaking you, because their absence does not erase the meaning of the connection. It simply means the lesson was greater than the outcome you originally imagined. You were never hard to love. You were never too much. You simply carried a depth that required emotional readiness from the person standing in front of you. And if someone could not meet that depth, it says more about where they were in their own healing than about your worth. The most powerful shift happened the moment you stopped waiting to be chosen and started choosing yourself. The moment you stopped chasing answers and started protecting your peace. The moment you realized that your value does not increase when someone finally recognizes it. Your value was always there from the beginning. Destiny is not about forcing people together no matter the cost. It is about guiding souls toward truth. Sometimes that truth leads to reunion, sometimes it leads to release, but it always leads toward growth. So walk forward without fear. Trust what this connection awakened inside you. Trust the strength you discovered through loss. Trust the boundaries you learned through pain. Trust the clarity that arrived after confusion. And above all, trust that what is truly meant for you will never require you to betray yourself in order to receive it. Because the greatest love story hidden inside all of this was never only about another person finally realizing your worth. It was about you finally realizing it too. In the end, the deepest truth hidden beneath this entire journey is not simply that someone misses you, thinks about you constantly, or finally understands your value after your absence forced them to confront themselves. The deeper truth is that your silence became the turning point where you finally returned to yourself. For so long, you carried the emotional weight of the connection. You explained, you waited, you hoped. You tried to understand behaviors that continuously left you confused, emotionally exhausted, and uncertain about where you truly stood. You kept offering patience, softness, loyalty, and emotional presence because loving deeply is part of your nature. You believed that if you just loved carefully enough, consistently enough, or selflessly enough, eventually the other person would meet you there too. But this journey slowly revealed something painful and liberating at the same time. Love cannot force emotional readiness. No amount of patience can heal someone who refuses to face themselves. No amount of understanding can substitute for another person's willingness to grow. And no amount of love should require you to slowly disappear inside the process of waiting to be fully chosen. That is why your withdrawal changed everything. You did not become cold. You did not manipulate. You did not seek revenge or try to punish anyone. You simply stopped abandoning yourself in order to maintain a connection that was asking you to carry more than your share. And the moment you did that, the entire energetic balance shifted. The person who once assumed your presence would always remain suddenly had to confront the reality of your absence. They were forced to sit with the silence they once relied upon, forced to experience the emptiness created when someone who genuinely understood them finally stopped overextending themselves to keep the connection alive. But even this realization is not the true center of the story. The true center is your transformation. You learned that boundaries are not cruelty. They are self-respect in visible form. You learned that silence is not weakness when it protects your peace. You learned that walking away from confusion is not failure. It is wisdom. Perhaps for the first time, you stopped measuring your worth through someone else's ability to recognize it. You stopped begging to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding you through the lens of their own fears and limitations. And this is why the connection changed you permanently. You no longer believe that love must feel anxious to feel real. You no longer confuse emotional inconsistency with depth. You no longer romanticize waiting endlessly for someone to become emotionally available while your own needs slowly go unmet. You have begun understanding that healthy love does not require self-betrayal. It does not ask you to become smaller, quieter, more patient, or less honest, just to remain loved. That lesson changes everything. The person thinking about you now is not only grieving your absence, they are grieving the version of themselves that existed while being loved by you. They are realizing that your presence created safety, grounding, understanding, and emotional clarity they did not fully appreciate while it was still available to them. And now, without constant access to your energy, they are being forced to confront themselves in ways distraction can no longer prevent. But whether they grow from this is their responsibility, not yours. That is one of the most important truths in this entire story. You are not responsible for carrying another person into emotional maturity. You are not responsible for sacrificing your peace while waiting for someone else to become ready. You are not responsible for managing the consequences of choices they freely made while you continuously tried to hold the connection together. Your responsibility is only this: to remain honest with yourself. If they return transformed, emotionally accountable, consistent, and capable of offering the kind of love that honors your growth, then you may choose what aligns with your heart and your peace. But if they return only because loneliness, regret, or fear finally became louder than avoidance, then no amount of longing can make that healthy. This is why your discernment matters now more than your desire. Because you have crossed a threshold internally. You cannot unknow what you now know about yourself. You cannot return fully to the version of yourself who tolerated uncertainty as proof of love. You cannot keep shrinking to fit inside emotionally unavailable spaces. Something fundamental has shifted inside you. And even though that shift may still feel fragile at times, it is real. The connection was real. The love was real. The pain was real. The transformation is real too. And perhaps the greatest realization of all is this: The ending of your self-abandonment was the beginning of your freedom. You stopped performing for love. You stopped proving your worth. You stopped chasing emotional clarity from someone unwilling to provide it consistently. You stopped exhausting yourself trying to earn what should have been offered freely. And in that quiet decision, you reclaimed your power. Not loud power, not controlling power, not power built on revenge or emotional games, but the rarest kind of power there is. The power of someone who finally understands that their value does not rise or fall based on who chooses them. That kind of self-awareness changes the course of an entire life. So if this connection taught you anything, let it be this: you are never asking for too much. You are simply asking the wrong person to meet you at the depth you naturally live within. And now, whether they return or not, you will never again settle for a love that requires you to abandon yourself just to keep it alive. In the end, this entire journey was never simply about whether someone would return, finally confess their feelings, or realize your value after your absence forced them to confront what they lost. Beneath every moment of silence, confusion, longing, distance, and emotional tension, something much deeper was unfolding. This was always a story about awakening, about self-worth, about transformation, about the moment a person finally stops abandoning themselves in the name of love. For a long time, you carried the connection with your patience, your emotional presence, your understanding, and your willingness to keep showing up even when clarity was missing. You tried to hold together something that often felt uncertain, because your heart believed that love meant endurance. You believed that if you loved carefully enough, deeply enough, selflessly enough, eventually the other person would recognize what they had in front of them and meet you at the same depth. But this journey slowly revealed a painful truth that changed everything. Love cannot force readiness. Love cannot heal someone who refuses to face themselves. And love should never require you to slowly disappear in order to keep another person comfortable. That is why your silence became so powerful. Not because silence is manipulation, not because distance is a game, but because stepping back was the first time you stopped betraying yourself just to preserve a connection that was not giving back what it continuously received from you. You stopped over-explaining. You stopped carrying the emotional labor for two people. You stopped trying to prove your worth to someone who should have recognized it without needing to lose access to you first. And in doing that, something shifted permanently inside both of you. The person who once believed your love would always remain available suddenly had to sit alone with the consequences of their own avoidance, inconsistency, fear, and emotional immaturity. They began replaying conversations, memories, moments of tenderness they once took for granted. They started realizing that your presence created a kind of emotional grounding they could not easily replace. And, perhaps for the first time, they were forced to confront a painful realization. Genuine love is not an unlimited resource someone can neglect without consequence. But even that realization is not the true heart of this story. The true heart is your transformation. And that lesson changed everything. This entire connection forced both people into growth. One person had to face the consequences of silence, avoidance, pride, and fear. The other had to face the consequences of self-abandonment, overgiving, and tying their worth too closely to being chosen. And whether reunion happens or not, neither soul leaves this experience unchanged. That is the true nature of destined connections. They are not always designed only for romance or permanence. Some connections arrive to awaken parts of you that could not remain asleep forever. Some enter your life to expose wounds, patterns, fears, and unconscious beliefs you may have carried for years. Some come to break generational cycles of overgiving, emotional suppression, fear of abandonment, or dependence on external validation. Some come to teach you that real love does not require shrinking yourself to fit inside another person's emotional limitations. And perhaps the most important realization of all is this: you were never difficult to love. You were simply offering a level of emotional depth, honesty, vulnerability, and presence that required inner readiness from the person standing in front of you. If they could not meet you there, that reflected their own unfinished healing, not your lack of worth. Now you stand in a completely different place than where this story began. You are no longer waiting for someone else to decide your value. You are no longer shaping your life around someone else's confusion. You are no longer begging silently for consistency while accepting crumbs of emotional availability. You're no longer losing yourself trying to save a connection that asked too much of your spirit. Instead, you're learning how to choose yourself with the same devotion you once gave so freely to others. And that changes the entire direction of your life. If this person returns one day, let it be because genuine transformation happened. Let it be because they learned accountability, emotional presence, consistency, and the courage required to love honestly. Let their actions speak louder than regret. Let time reveal whether growth is real or simply fear responding to loss. But if they never return, let that truth free you instead of breaking you. Because the purpose of this journey was never only about another person finally recognizing your worth. It was about you finally recognizing it too. The silence taught you. The distance strengthened you. The heartbreak awakened you. The loss redirected you. And the pain that once felt unbearable slowly became the doorway into a stronger, wiser, more grounded version of yourself. Nothing was wasted. Not the waiting, not the tears, not the confusion, not the love you gave, not even the heartbreak. Every part of it carried meaning because every part of it moved you closer to yourself. And that is the deepest conclusion hidden beneath this entire story. Real love does not ask you to abandon your peace in order to keep it alive. Real love does not demand self-erasure as proof of devotion. Real love meets you, honors you, chooses you clearly, and grows beside you instead of feeding on your willingness to endlessly endure uncertainty. You were never meant to spend your life proving your worth to people incapable of recognizing it. You were meant to become someone who recognizes it within yourself first. And once you truly understand that, everything changes forever.